for joining. This seminar series is titled Historical Tropes in Contemporary Anti-Semitism. So this is the second seminar in this series. The series brings out the perennial patterns in the phenomenon of anti-Semitism to shed light on the matter of why exactly it's the longest hatred. So the aim of this series is to focus on the millennial themes and the variations on those themes that bring out the essence of anti-Semitism, to expose and explain why the phenomenon is at once ancient and modern, and 3, to have a deeper understanding of how and what was once the scandal of anti-Semitism morphs into a fashionable anti-Semitism. Lastly, it's also to enable participants in the seminar to recognize the phenomenon in all of its subtle manifestations and to seek ways of responding to it. So our speaker here is Professor David Patterson. He holds the Hillel Distinguished Chair in Holocaust Studies at the Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies at the University of Texas at Dallas. He is a commissioner on the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commissioner and a member of the executive board of the annual Scholars Conference on the Holocaust and the Churches. He has lectured at universities on 6 continents and throughout the United States. He has published over 40 books and over 240 articles, essays, and book chapters on anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and Jewish studies. He is also a senior research fellow here at ISGAP. He's also part of the academic steering committee, and we're honored to have him. So David, the floor is yours. I'll stop sharing my screen, so you're welcome to share yours.
Thank you, El Shaddai, thank you. We're good to go, right? We can see the screen?
Yep, we can see it clearly.
Okay, good. Yes, tracing the trope of redemptive anti-Semitism. The phrase redemptive anti-Semitism, at least for me, has something horrific about it. I mean, it sends just the phrase itself sends a shudder through me. How could it be redemptive, salvific? What does it mean to call it that? Is it necessarily redemptive? In the early expressions of anti-Semitism or contempt for the Jews, might be a better term, I don't think you find this redemptive aspect. It's more that, cultural bias or even bigotry, if you like. In ancient times, Democritus, the Greek philosopher, accused the Jews of going out on highways and kidnapping people and taking them to the temple to be slaughtered. So, the first blood libel. The Egyptian priest Manetho had perhaps an ancient Egyptian contempt for the Jews. The Roman historian Tacitus saw the Jews as at best strange and just not civilized somehow, not cultured. He complained that the Jews absolutely reject human sacrifice, which he took to be, something that is part of the ancient world. Now, the term redemptive anti-Semitism is credited actually to Shaul Friedlander and his work, The Years of Persecution, Years of Extermination. Friedlander describes redemptive anti-Semitism this way. He says, in redemptive anti-Semitism, the struggle against the Jews is the dominant aspect of a worldview in which other racist themes are but secondary appendages. Redemption would come as liberation from the Jews, as their expulsion, possibly their annihilation. I would add that redemptive anti-Semitism, and the term redemption is in some ways a theological category. Redemptive anti-Semitism, seems to me, arises with the human usurpation of the divine throne of judgment and the determination of the damned and the redeemed. This ascent to a position of absolute and total judgment of the damned and the saved, the damned and the redeemed, comes either in a theological move, a religious move, sectarian move, or it can come, as we'll see, in an ideological move. So, redeemed from what? The redemption is from the evil eternal Jew and the contagion, the evil of Judaism. The premise here is not that all Jews are evil, but that all evil is Jewish. So that deliverance from evil comes with deliverance from the Jew. No one is more deserving of contempt than the Jew. Hatred of the Jew here with redemptive anti-Semitism becomes a religious duty, something holy and pleasing to God. And I'll look at various manifestations of it. Perhaps to many of us, the most familiar is in the Christian tradition, and you see as a certain evolution of redemptive anti-Semitism. It begins with delegitimizing the Jew and disconnecting the Jew from the Jew's connection to God. Okay, disconnecting from the mitzvot. And when Saint Ignatius enjoins his co-religionists to do not observe the Jewish commandments, and of course the commandment, a mitzvah, is precisely a connection. Don't make those connections to God. Those are illegitimate connections to God. Of course, you notice that Ignatius died in 108, so the Christians are still trying to figure out where redemption lies. In the Gospel of John, which was written probably around the time Ignatius died, of course, it wouldn't become canon, part of the canon, until the 4th century. But here's the key to salvation. He who believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not believe in the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God shall abide on him. So this is the stake. This is what is at stake in the elimination of the Jew, everlasting life. So you have this new key to redemption, belief in the Christ as the Son of God, Jesus of Nazareth. And with this key to redemption, a new key, you have a new dispensation, a new covenant. And it's a new relationship to God that supersedes and therefore delegitimizes the covenant of Abraham. And this will proceed further. It will evolve further into an official teaching of contempt, as you get from these church fathers, Tertullian, Justin Martyr, Origen, Cyprian, and the spread of the deicide charge that the Jews are the murderers of God. They are the unrepentant murderers of God. Even when offered salvation in Jesus, they still refuse that redemption, not because they don't know that Jesus is the Son of God. They know perfectly well. It's because they do know. They know how to recognize the Messiah. They wrote the book on how to do that. So we have a couple of scholars who I think make important points in this connection. Joel Carmichael, he says what would otherwise have been mere exoticism, a cluster of normal dissimilarities between different groups, was escalated by the Jewish role as a counter-incarnation. The Jew gets placed into a theological category here. So it's escalated to a level of lofty horror that in the very process of sparing the Jews heightened their demonically powerful character. Stephen Katz, very well-known scholar, that points out, once the Jews become a theological category, they become a mythic creature, as Katz says. A Jew can be God incarnate, they can be the devil incarnate, but they can never again be merely human. Humans don't threaten our redemption. Other humans, the threat to redemption is satanic. It comes from the devil. And so you have this demonizing of the Jews. St. Jerome, the translator of the Bible into Latin, says, whoever observes the ceremonies of the Jews has fallen into the pit of the devil. John Chrysostom, famous for his oratory powers, his skills, proclaims the Jews to be worshipers of Satan. Satan leads them in their revels in the synagogues. So the holy hatred of the Jew, the redemptive hatred, you understand, becomes incorporated into the prayers, into the liturgy. Ephraim of Syria, another one of the fathers, Eusebius of Caesarea, proclaimed hatred of the Jew to be holy. It's not an unpleasant necessity to get rid of the Jews. It's doing God's work. This redemptive hatred becomes a religious duty going into the Middle Ages. Athanasius of Constantinople says it is a duty. How can you not hate the murderer of God, the unrepentant murderer, the demonic murderer? How can you not have contempt for that? How can you not want to eliminate that? So here, in the next development here, redemption will come to require spilling the blood of a Jew. Indeed, it's the blood of the Jew that washes us clean of our sins. I see this as a kind of turnaround of the blood of Jesus, the Jew, who washes me clean of my sins as a Christian. If only I believe in Jesus, then his blood washes me clean. Here we have priests during the time of the Crusades, First Crusade, set out in 1096, where you have priests, local priests saying whoever kills a Jew will have his sins forgiven. Now, this was not, I should point out, this was not the official position of the church, and there were officials in the church who told these priests, that's not what we teach. Nevertheless, the message is out there, and certainly purging Christendom of the contagion of the Jew and Judaism is and will come to be viewed as necessary to salvation. The spilled blood of Jesus calls out for the blood of the Jew. Humanity has to be bled of its impure blood. You remember doctors used to bleed their patients to get out all the bad blood. This purity of blood will kick in certainly by the time of the Spanish Inquisition. Notice here, this is also from the 13th century. Around this image is from around the time when the Mamluks drove out the Christians from the Holy Land at the end of there were 9 major crusades, so that the Jews are not only delegitimized and dehumanized, they are demonized. And you'll see who is the one that they are bringing before Caiaphas to be condemned to death. It's the Redeemer, the source of redemption. So the Jews threaten redemption, they threaten the Redeemer. Excuse me. This is reenacted. The murder of the Redeemer is reenacted in the desecration of the host. In crucifying the wafers, you see a Jew putting a knife into the wafer from communion. The wafer is the body of Jesus. right? So they not only kill Christian children, and they not only desecrate the host, they do it in a ritualized, satanic manner. What is the source of this evil? Where is this? What is the Bible, the Jewish Bible of evil? It can't be the Hebrew Bible. It can't be the prophets, right? That's part of the Christian canon. Christians need the prophets in order to legitimize the belief in Jesus as Messiah. And they had this, in the third and fourth centuries, they had this argument as to what the canon should be. What do we need? Marcion, one of the early Christian leaders, said, we don't need those Hebrew scriptures. Anyway, so what is the Jewish Bible? The satanic Bible? It's the Talmud. It's the Talmud, right? So that has to be purged and purified by fire, which will bring to mind Heinrich Heine's prophecy. And in this case, a comment on history: when you begin by burning books, you end by burning people. During the Rindfleisch massacres, in which tens of thousands of Jews were murdered, you have images like this of their being burned, not as punishment, but as a purification necessary for redemption. The Jews here are not criminals. They're not sinners. They're devils. They threaten our redemption. You have a repeat in 1349 with the spread of plague throughout Europe, a plague that decimated the population of Europe. Where does the plague come from? Whether it's the Black Death or coronavirus, comes from the Jews, who are the witnesses to Judaism. The Jews are the carriers of the contagion. In this case, the contagion is the Judaism that threatens not just your health, but your immortal soul. Okay, the life of the soul itself is at stake in purging the Jews from our midst. And to purge the Jews from your midst is to purge Satan himself. The only power that Satan wields is the power that the Jews wield. And in this image of Satan, you see Satan on the right, you see the circle, what looks like a circle on his clothing, that's a Jew badge, which in Christendom, from the time of the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, the Jews were required to wear. I mean, the Nazis were not altogether original. And then with the Spanish Inquisition, since redemption lies in correct belief, whosoever believes, heresy threatens that redemption. And heresy is by definition false belief. There were four major inquisitions: the medieval Inquisition, Spanish Inquisition, Portuguese Inquisition, and Roman Inquisition, in that order. The Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions focused on the heresy of Judaizing. The heresy of Judaizing, institutionalizing this premise that because the Jew spreads a false belief, the Jew brings damnation. And even the Jews who have converted remain suspect. And many, thousands of them were turned over to the auto de fe, burned at the stake. Not just converts, but of course, Jews who refuse to convert, the purification by fire. Now, Islam also has its version of redemptive anti-Semitism. In the Quran proclaims this is the book. This is your key to redemption. Here too, true belief is what gets you into paradise. And the Jews in the Quran are treated in many different ways, sometimes very favorably. But there are places in the Quran where the Jews are referred to as Satans who threaten true belief and therefore threaten the life of the soul. So the promise of redemption is a promise of an entry into paradise, where the ticket to paradise is this true belief, belief in the Quran, belief in the Prophet, everything that's in the Shahada. You know, I believe in, you know, in Allah, and there's no God but Allah. Muhammad is his prophet, and the Quran is his word, and so on. Indeed, in the Quran, we're taught that the Jews are falsifiers of the word, and therefore a threat to salvation, the salvation of the soul. There were 3 tribes in the vicinity of Medina at the time of Muhammad: the Banu Qurayza, Banu Nadir, Banu Kinuka. The men of the Banu Qurayza were all slaughtered, and then the other 2, Nadir and Kinuka, were expelled, again, as a source of false teaching that has to be purged. You have this association of Jews and Christians, non-believers, with the devils, with images of devils. They were required to mark their homes with that so the Muslims could stay away from them. Why? Because they threaten salvation. They are the threat to redemption. They are the impurity in our midst. Okay, an example of purging the ummah, the Islamic community, the body of believers from the impurity of the Jews. Infamous massacre of the Jews of Granada on December 30th, 1066, which was a Sabbath. About 4,000 Jews were killed. The leader of the community, Joseph ibn Negrella, was crucified. Joseph ibn Negrella was the son of a famous Jew from a generation before, Shmuel HaNagid. So this purification requires, invariably will come to require not just expulsion, but shedding blood, extermination. Ibn Tumar, who foreshadowed the Almohad persecutions, which lasted for more than a century. The Almohad persecutions were a move to purify Islam, North Africa, southern Spain, and the source of impurity, the impurity that threatens to soil the soul and turn the soul over to the fire, is the Jew. So Ibn Tumar called for a purging of Israel, the name of Israel, from the midst of the Muslim world, that it may no more be in remembrance. As exile is tied to oblivion, as the Baal Shem says, so is memory tied to redemption. As long as there is any remembrance of the name of Israel, the life of the soul remains threatened. And moving to the modern period, I'm kind of jumping here for the sake of time. Abdul al-Maududi, who was a foundational thinker, some call him the founder of political Islam. All of the Islamists, Islamic jihadists, are influenced by him. They all turn to him. He is from Lahore, from what would later be Pakistan. He says, Islam wants the whole earth and does not content itself with only a part thereof. It wants and requires the entire inhabited world, not to rule the world, but to redeem the world. You see, he refers to the Jews as devils. Islam has the meaning and the mission to save humanity, to save the soul of humanity. Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, has said that the Brotherhood, as a pure and unsullied, unblemished by any stain, it is the arm of Islam that has been given the honor to deliver the world from the Jews. Sayyid Qutb, continuing this motif of satanizing. Qutb is the most influential Muslim Brotherhood ideologue. Everyone after him, including Ayatollah Khomeini, translated his works into Farsi. Everyone, Osama bin Laden, Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, they all are followers of Sayyid Qutb, who describes the Jews as the party of Satan, the Hizb al-Shaitan, in contrast to Hizb Allah, right? Hezbollah, the party of Allah. Only Islam, according to Qutb, can save humanity from the evil of the Jews. To exterminate them, he claims, is a religious imperative, a duty, and it's redemptive. It will bring redemption. These are not just religious fanatics. They're the head of the most prominent university in the Muslim world, perhaps, arguably Al-Azhar, Abdul Ali Mahmoud, demonizes the Jew as the ones who threaten the life of the soul. Haj Amin al-Husseini, Nazi war criminal, would preach that Muslims are required to slaughter Jews wherever they find them. Their spilled blood pleases Allah. Whoever kills a Jew is assured a place in the next world. Hassan Nasrallah, I mentioned, the Hezbollah leader, describes Hezbollah as the clearinghouse for all humanity. If you want to attain redemption and salvation, you got to go through Hezbollah. They have usurped the throne of divine judgment, as all the others that I've been describing. Now, in the modern period, with the 19th century, as God is being thought out of the picture, the Jews go from the theological to the metaphysical. The Jews continue to be a threat to the ideological utopia, to the utopian thinking. And here we have Charles Fourier, Alphonse Toussaint, Proudhon, Karl Marx, familiar faces, socialists and communists, all of whom were atheists, but all of whom demonize the Jew. And here you have some statements from them. Charles Fourier, never has there been a more contemptible nation than the Jews. So now, I understand the persecution that the Romans, the Christians, and the Muslims made the Jews suffer. And our contempt is a legitimate retribution. Proudhon, it's not for nothing that the Christians call them deicides. This is Proudhon, who doesn't believe in God, right? The Jew is the enemy of the human race here. The emancipation of the Jew, says Marx, is the emancipation of mankind from Judaism. There's the redemption of humanity. It's the deliverance, emancipation from Judaism. So the ideologue here now ascends to the throne of an absolute, if not a divine judgment. And Joel Carmichael notes this as well. It's from the very beginning of the socialist movement, in the wake of the French Revolution, it was usual to take over the ancient stereotypes of the Jews that we just seen, rooted in church doctrine, dress it up in a more contemporary form as a way of describing the enemy of the utopian redemptive dream. And so here we have the Jew who threatens all of humanity. This on the left, you have an image from Nazi propaganda. On the right, this is the cover of an Arabic edition of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Once again, I mean, you note this satanic figure on the cover of the Zionistskie Protokoli, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a Russian publication, first published in 1903, widespread after the First World War. The Jews are secret. They are as invisible as Satan. They threaten the soul. They threaten the body politic. They threaten social values. They threaten the utopian dream. They threaten the authority of the human who would be as God. And here are two examples, and both of whom come from Christian contexts, right? Hitler and Stalin. Here, and I'll just spend like 2 more minutes and I'll wrap this up. Enter anti-Zionism. Among the nations, Israel takes the place of the Jew. Israel becomes the source of all evil. Israel is tagged with every evil. And so with racism, human rights violation, colonialism, genocide, Israelis are Nazis, and the Soviets were the ones who really were pushing this in the UN. We have it now in the BDS movement, Omar Barghouti, with the blood libel, Israelis go out at night and hunt children, and the World Jewish Conspiracy, the Jews control governments. Any and all evil can be found in Israel, and Israeli Apartheid Week has become part of the familiar landscape of college campuses. And I think Franz Rosenzweig has a key to this, to why it takes on this, anti-Semitism takes on this redemptive aspect. He says, what he says with regard to Christianity, I think can be said vis-a-vis Islam as well as totalitarian ideologies. The existence of the Jew constantly subjects Christianity to the idea that it is not attaining the goal, the truth, that it ever remains on the way, that the profoundest reason, that is the profoundest reason for Christian hatred of the Jews. In other words, the Jew is eternally unsettling, undermining the project of redemption, not just economic prosperity, not just political and social harmony. No, it's eternal salvation here. However, whether you understand that in religious terms or in ideological terms, the Jew undermines, unsettles all the fixed formulas and ready answers. All of the guarantees are gone. The Jew is unsettling, and eternally so, and is thus demonized. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Patterson. We have a few questions that were submitted in the chat, and then we have a few individuals who raised their hands as well. We can start with the hands raised if you don't mind. I think it's there, Mr. Kerry Nelson.
Hi, thanks for a really extremely well organized and informative talk, and rather strikingly illustrated as well, which counts for something. At the very end, you reproduce an image of Barghouti. So I thought I would encourage you to do what I'm sure you've already thought about at great length, which is the redemptive element in contemporary anti-Semitism, the BDS movement, and the emergence and increase of left-wing anti-Semitism. Because I think, you're really pointing to something significant.
Yes. Thank you, Kerry. And let me say, I've been an admirer of your work. Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm on that. I'm working on that. It's what I call morally required anti-Semitism. You cannot be regarded as a good person, therefore redeemed somehow, unless you oppose the existence of the Jewish state. in many circles, in many circles. You know this better than I do. Yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, we also have a question from Philip Mutisia. If you would like to ask it, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or happy to read the question out loud here as well.
I just thank you for one, David. I remember we had a great conversation since Oxford, and
Yeah, Philip,
colleagues. Yes, and I've been dealing with a whole lot of issues with death, and COVID has done us in havoc. I lost about 5 people in the same siblings in the same 1 year. That's why I've not been as active in this forum. But I put a comment in there asking how can we shift the narrative, so to speak, of the anti-Semitism and anti-anybody, which has led to internalized oppression, because we have realized a fatigue of talking and relating history on anti-racism, anti-Semitism, anti-African, whatever, Black issues and all that. The young generation, they get fatigued quickly by when they just hear a discussion, an arguments, and there's no hope for offer to reconcile with the past and the present and the anticipate future progressive thinking whereby you reconcile, like as in Rwanda. Rwanda is a country thriving. What happened in South Africa has not gone to where Rwanda has, because there has been continued dialogue whereby you sit with someone who has killed your brother or just your sister in front of you, and they reconcile, and then aiming at preserving the resilience of our identity from individual to group to the other groups. I'm seeking for, there's no way you can positively address these issues without pain, without experiencing fatigue. So how do we frame the dialogue? And we have had a good example in the past with the Paulo Freire methods, where they have worked, the pedagogy of the oppressed, accepting we have not seen, we have killed each other. And so current phenomena I see is, instead of reconciling and bring healing, it's edge free. In the way we teach in the universities, we are divided also in the education. So I'm trying to reach out there and say, what can I tell my grandchild? There was a Jewish oppression. There was African people, Jewish who are part of Africans, and so forth and so forth. It's not different people. So we discriminate one, or you are anti one, you anti yourself and others. Where's the nexus in contemporary? Because it's very, very tough time globally.
Yes, the horror, the danger, the terror lies in, as I suggested in the beginning, ascending to the throne of divine judgment. In other words, insisting on correct belief, correct creed, correct political party. You have to be, if you're not part of the party line, you're somehow damned. If you're not reciting the right creed, you're somehow damned. We come across this when in interfaith dialogue. I mean, we have to check the creed at the door, seems to me, if we're going to talk. I mean, God doesn't ask Cain, what do you believe? He asks him, where's your brother and what have you done? So there's that, number one. Number two, we have to let go of our fixed formulas and ready answers. We're never farther from the truth than we think we have it in hand, and we've got the formula. We have to teach our students to be unafraid of questions and questioning. And I mean, that's easily said, but those of us who live in the academic world know that raising questions about certain things can jeopardize your standing as a student, graduate student, young professor, not so much for old senior guys like me, but which makes it all the more incumbent on me to raise the question, right? So let go of the fixed formulas, learn to ask questions. We have to, cultivate that. Ask more about, where's your brother and what have you done than what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you believe. I care how you behave, how you treat your fellow human being.
Thank you for that question. Bren, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you, David. Excellent presentation, as always. I'd like you to address, I'll try to phrase this very briefly. It's clear to me that there is a bridge from the past to the present that deals specifically with the religious domain and the political domain of the time and where we are today. In a similar kind of way, the religious element, I think, has faded. I personally think if you ask people, except maybe in the Muslim world or in a very orthodox way, think differently about the role of Judaism and what they're fighting for and so on. But without question, I'd like you to, or let me back up. I'd like you to clarify or help clarify for me an understanding of how much of the motivation going back 2,000 years ago, when all of this war began against Jews, against Judaism, and the philosophy that was represented at that time, how much of it was a collaboration between the religious authorities and the political authorities, the kings and queens, the rulers of the world at that time, and where is there a lesson to be learned where we are today?
Yes, excellent question. Historically and in our own time, wherever there's a definitive bond between God and the state, or absolute authority and the state, the Jews have a problem. The Jews are targeted. The standing of the Jew in ancient times shifted in around 385 when Christianity became the official religion of Rome, okay? Not just a tolerated religion. And then followed by the Code of Justinian, which not only delegitimizes Jews, Judaism, Jewish practice, but makes it criminalized. So as soon as you have the political and the religious are wed, which is how Abdul al-Maududi describes jihadism, it's the wedding of politics and religion, of God and state. Ayatollah Khomeini says to oppose the state is to oppose God, right? That invariably leads to redemptive anti-Semitism. So it's as long as the king has the status of God, so to say, you'll have Jew hatred. The Hebrew Bible, with all of its depth and beauty and wisdom, knows this. And the story of David and Nathan, right? The prophet Nathan, who calls out the king. The Torah, who limits the power and the possessions of the king, requires the king to write a Torah. As soon as the king is the head of the church, like the Tsar of Russia is the head of the church, then you legitimize any opposing view, and starting with the Jews. Power, why does absolute power corrupt absolutely, to, if you forgive my invoking the cliche, because it leads you to usurp God, to be like God. It's the most ancient temptation. You will be like God, not the God who is loving and forgiving, but the God who is powerful, who gets his way, has no responsibility to anybody. So, I mean, as soon as, with the advent of the separation of church and state, that we have a move that at least will mitigate the anti-Semitic impulse, I think. And you see it in ancient times already with, like I said, the story of King David and the prophet Nathan. Thank you for the question, Bram, as always.
Thank you. Sarah Rudin, would you like to ask your question? You're muted, so I'm just going to ask you to unmute.
Sure, sorry about that. Yeah, I am a translator of sacred literature as well as classics. So I'm used to exploring these texts in a lot of detail. And yes, and I'm very sorry to come late. And I was wondering whether the text of the New Testament itself had been explored early on, because there's anti-Semitism seems to me to go back to the, absolute beginning of Christianity, and to have to do with, sweeping claims of Christian populism. You talked about, I think very cogently about the state's overweening power and, anti-Semitism cropping up there. But also, if you have a religion that claims power in some, absolute and unquestionable sense, as it's clear, from the Gospels that Christianity did from the start, aren't you in trouble there too? I mean, it's a state and religion melding more than dichotomy. That's my feeling.
Yes, but no, this is a good point. And the 4th century is a huge turning point in the history of Christianity. Starting when the legalization or tolerance of Christianity under the Emperor Constantine, Christianity itself had been a persecuted movement. Mm-hmm. Various emperors, right? Mm-hmm. And the Christians themselves weren't sure exactly what the correct belief was. So when Constantine made Christianity, permissible, and the Nicene Council was called in 325, the aim of which was to determine correct belief, to heresy. And Judaism is a religion not so much of correct belief, but of kosher actions. Mm-hmm. It's as I said, where's your brother and what have you done? It's what God asked of Cain. Mm-hmm. So, it's on the popular side, as a popular movement, because Paul is writing his letters to the churches. Paul died in the year 60 before the Gospels were written. But going through the church leaders, he goes from the church leaders to the people, right? Mm. Who want to be saved, but don't know what that means exactly. I mean, who want eternal life? Whosoever believes shall have everlasting life. Mm.
He says, for example, he says, I think a lot of these ideas may be rooted very early in his quarrels with the Jewish establishment and with various Jewish diaspora communities. And he says very clearly that the belief in the necessity of circumcision cancels salvation. So he's already set up this idea of, Jewish practice as the enemy. You have a dichotomy. You have, Jewish law, particularly including circumcision. If you believe in it, then it cancels out salvation, because salvation is absolutely sweeping belief claim. And this is where I think the danger is in populism. In the Gospel of John, nobody reads the long sermons because they're just horrifyingly boring. But what they do is simply pound in the necessity of unquestioned belief. And I see that as a problem from the get-go.
Well, especially when it becomes part of a political structure as well.
Yeah, which it inevitably does.
Which it does, yeah. Very good, thank you.
Okay, and then we have a question from, I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Georgette. I'm not sure if she'll be able to unmute. Give me a sec. Okay, if not, it's okay. The answer's in the chat. So David, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I can read it out as well. Thank you for the link between the accusation of the Christians to Muslims. The theory of replacement is still alive and well. Do these people accuse Jews because Judaism is their conscience, showing them that they are not completed? Also, their propaganda is a projection of what they want to do. They want to conquer the world. They accuse us to do so. They kill and accuse us of killing, etc.
Georgette, yeah, I see the question and the comment. Yes, both Christianity and Islam both of them are supersessionist. In other words, they replace prior dispensations, revelations, scriptures even. They have to. Although, I mean, Christianity, you might say, well, they draw the Hebrew Bible into their canon. Not exactly. They draw the Latin Bible into their canon. They translate the Hebrew Bible into Latin. And as I'm sure those of you who are here, like Sarah, the translator, you know, when you translate, you interpret. And if you have an agenda, you know, you're interpreting. And indeed, in Christendom, the reading of the Hebrew scriptures for most of their history was forbidden, if not, I mean, certainly discouraged. Islam sees the Hebrew scriptures as having been falsified by the Jews and the Christian scriptures corrupted by the Jews. I think the point about projection is worth noting, is a good one, and we do this. We perceive in the other the evil that is in ourselves very often, very often. So I look at the Jews, they're God, they killed God, they killed Jesus, they killed the Redeemer, and somewhere inside me, perhaps, I'd like to get rid of God. I'd like to kill Jesus. If Jesus calls me to the cross, and doesn't just take my place on the cross, but calls me to the cross, I don't want that. I don't want to be called. Who wants to be called to the cross? I have to eliminate that. So if the Jew, so I accuse the Jew of eliminating, of being the deicide. I accuse the Jew of this secret controlling of the world. Abdul al-Maududi makes no bones about it. Islam wants to control all of humanity, right? And in a war against the Satan, against the Jew who's trying to control all of humanity secretly. And notice here that the Jew who embodies evil is invisible. This is important. The Jew is as invisible as Satan. The object of anti-Semitic hatred is not Mr. Katz, who runs the local store where I go to buy my dry goods, right? I kind of like Mr. Katz. He's okay. You know, Himmler complained that every German has his or her Jew that he wants to protect. We got to get rid of that thinking. And you saw the image of the eternal Jew. No Jew looks like that. No one looks like that, right? So the Jew is mythologized, rendered invisible as a projection, what is deep in the darkest corners of my own psyche. If I project it on the Jew, I purge it from myself, okay? And whatever it might be, whatever the evil might be, whether it's, lusting after our women, poisoning our wells, moral corruption. The Jews are behind drug trade, alcoholism, prostitution. Whatever the evil is, the Jews are behind it. Hamas Charter says the Jews have a hand in every war that is taking place, says the Hamas Charter. Okay, you want to be rid of war, get rid of the Jews. So yeah, this projection of the evil within us is something we should guard with regard to ourselves, yes, but it's certainly at work in many ways, I think, in the phenomenon of anti-Semitism.
Okay, thank you, David. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. One is from Israel. I'm not sure he's here to ask. Okay, we'll just go on and read it. Would you say that the claim of knowing the absolute truth made today by many on the left is the entry to redemptive hatred of Israel?
Yes. Short answer. Yes. No, as I have a chapter in a book coming out in the spring called Morally Required Anti-Semitism, which finds one of its major manifestations in anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism understood to be an opposition not to the policies of the Jewish state, but to the presence of the Jewish state, the existence of the Jewish state. And the Jewish state has to be demonized so that I can self-righteously condemn the Jewish state. It has to be demonized at every turn. And the demonization of the Jewish state entails often the endorsement of various Palestinian causes, including Hamas. And this is certainly true in academia and in academic professional organizations. So it's, and as I mentioned earlier, I know people who have been chastised, some cases, couple of cases lost jobs for speaking out on behalf of the Jewish state in their academic environments. It is not, in many places, it is not tolerated. Jewish students, according to recent surveys by the Brandeis Center and others, more than half have experienced either verbal or physical anti-Semitic incidents. And most Jews on most campuses, according to the survey, are afraid for it to be known that they're Jewish. It's fashionable, it's acceptable to have contempt for the Jews. And as I have argued, it has become, in many quarters, morally required. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, David. For the final question, Jacob, you were trying to unmute you. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Ruth Wise, in many of her books and essays, has argued for a political anti-Semitism. And the starting point for many of her ideas is Wilhelm Marr in Germany in, I think, the 1870s. And she traces the history of political anti-Semitism. And I guess in my own mind, I saw that as replacing the theological-based anti-Semitism, which before Wilhelm Marr was the predominant or maybe the only form of Jew hatred. So I don't have a question, but rather a comment, which is that your presentation has helped me to understand that these two phenomena exist side by side. Political anti-Semitism in the person of Wilhelm Marr did not replace traditional Christian or religious or theological anti-Semitism, but they exist at the same time. And if anything, if I understand your presentation correctly, we now have a new, even more virulent form of theologically based Jew hatred. So I thank you for your presentation, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for mentioning Ruth Weiss, an excellent thinker, deeply insightful. Wilhelm Marr introduced the term anti-Semitism to replace the term Jew hatred, Judenhass. He did so when he founded the Association of Anti-Semites on Yom Kippur, 1879. And if you look at the dynamic of anti-Semitism, whether it's in academia or in the political parties in the West, you'll see very often points of contact between ideological, political anti-Semitism and very often jihadist anti-Semitism. Their anti-Semitism makes for strange bedfellows. But even the political has its, I would argue, has its metaphysical dimension. And if the Jews are in the mix, I would suggest that God is in the mix, either as the one who is questioning us or the one who doesn't exist. But you, as Elie Wiesel once said, you can accept God or reject God, but you can't ignore God. Certainly not as long as God's witnesses, the Jewish people, just by their presence, signify that testimony. As long as they're hanging around, God, in some sense, is hanging around. Somebody in the chat asked me to recommend a book, and I'll take this opportunity to be brazenly self-promoting. I wrote a book called Anti-Semitism and Its Metaphysical Origins. It was published by Cambridge University Press 3 or 4 years ago. So it's Anti-Semitism and Its Metaphysical Origins, I can suggest. And it has a good bibliography, I think.
Thank you for that. If we make the next few questions just really short and brief, then we may be able to go through them really quickly. So Mark, if you want to ask your question very quickly, and then David, quick answer as well, possible.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you again for a wonderful talk. I wonder if we replaced the concept theology with the concept of a worldview, whether we wouldn't get exactly the same sort of result, but we bring it back to modern times. Jews threaten the dominant worldview. They're outside of what everyone knows and what's obvious to everyone. And people hate contradiction, and they hate those who stand outside of the worldview and who seem to be able to thrive or to make sense of the world in a way that the dominant view of society can't accept. So the dominant worldview has to label them as either mad or bad, hence anti-Semitism.
Yes, yeah, I mean, You can make that move, certainly. Certainly worldview in the sense of a Weltanschauung, to use the German term, which has its own metaphysics, right? Its own, its first principles. So in that respect, there is a parallel. I see that. Yeah, sure.
And that's why in the contemporary world, the worldview of the progressive worldview has no room for Jews or for Zionism and as a concept. And those who back Zionism and Jews who identify with Zionism are outside of what everyone knows and what's obvious, and suffer the consequences.
With an important distinction here, worldview. Worldview will brook no compromise, like religious view. It can't be negotiated.
Right.
Once you establish it, it's like it's engraved in the 2 tablets of stone, so to say, like from Mount Sinai. So yeah, no, that's a good point, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you again, Professor Patterson, for another fantastic presentation. We have in the comment section, I've linked David Patterson's book, the one he mentioned, called Anti-Semitism and Metaphysical Origins. There's also a link to Poisoning the Wells, which David Patterson also has a chapter in. It's the new publication for ISGAP. So thank you all for joining us today, and hope to see you all in the next series, the next presentation of the series 2 weeks from now. It was lovely having you all. Thank you again.
Be well. All blessings.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.